What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmaker's Corner podcast. It is April 21st, 2016 when I'm recording this, episode 514. Usually this would be released on Thursday, but, we wanted to release it today so that we could preview a couple of the conference championships that will be going down this weekend. So the title should say 2026 Women's College Flag Football Week 10 Recognitions and Championship Weekend Preview. We have a whole bunch of championships to look over. The Sun Conference, the KCAC, NAIA East Independence, United East, and the D3, the NACC up in Illinois or Wisconsin, and then we have a whole bunch to talk about, and even some of the great performances from this last week here when we do Playmaker of the Week. So without further ado, let's just hop right into the football. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about Playmaker of the Week. Usually we go ahead and give this recognition out to the player that has done a really good job and has contributed a lot to their team this past week here in a performance that we deem super important. But, what is more important than the conference championships? And so, per tradition, we've done this every year since we've started covering women's college flag football. But the Playmaker of the Week, we usually go with a couple. The Playmakers of the Week come from the winning team of a conference championship, and we had two this last week. We had the first ever KCAC NAIA conference championship, and then we had the Conference Carolinas conference championship. And so let's go ahead and start with the Conference Carolinas Playmaker of the Week. And sometimes it's the tournament MVP, sometimes it's not. It just depends. Usually it's just our opinion and what we believe, but we decided to go ahead and go with Janelle Francis here of Wingate. Wingate obviously being the team who won it all in this tournament. Just going over her stats real quick. 4 flag posts and an interception against Mount St. Mary's, and then on offense, 143 passing yards, 4 touchdowns to 1 pick, and 26 rushing yards against them. And then in the next round, they would go ahead and play Barden in the semis, where she would throw for another 182 yards and 4 touchdowns, no picks, and then 58 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Defensively, also got 4 flag pulls and 2 pass breakups. That would then go ahead and put them in the conference championship here against Ferrum, where she had 210 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, 60 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, a flagpole, and an interception, plus a pass breakup, as Wingate goes ahead and wins the first ever Conference Carolinas tournament. And your Playmaker of the Week from Week 10, one of your Playmakers of the Week from Week 10, is Wingate's Janelle Francis. Now going to the KCAC conference tournament here, we went with a player from Hope International who obviously won it all, and it's their quarterback, Anahir Morales. In the semis versus Simpson, she had 187 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, also 41 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns in that game. That would go ahead and put them in the conference championship, where against, I think this is La Sierra, she had 185 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 32 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown, on the way to go ahead and beat them 13-7 for the first ever KCAC conference championship, which goes to Hope International and their Week 10 Playmaker of the Week, Anahir Morales. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about the Sun Conference tournament here. This should be some pretty good flag football. Maybe some previews of the NAIA Invitational for sure. But let's hop right into it. So first off, this will be hosted by Warner. Quarterfinals will take place on April 23rd. I'm hoping by the time this episode comes out, it is the 22nd, so just the day before, a little bit earlier, so that you could get this content before then. And here are the matchups for the quarterfinals, because Warner and Kaiser both get a bye. Obviously, Warner is the top seed, Kaiser the 2 seed. So to start, we have number 4 number 4 Life versus number 5 Thomas here. Both teams winning 10 games here. Life 10-5, Thomas 10-6. In the regular season, Life actually took that matchup in double overtime and won 34-27. It is worth noting, though, that Thomas did not have Destiny Lockett in that matchup, which does matter because she does play quarterback and has been kind of heating up at quarterback the last couple weeks here. They had to go with Cam King, who did a solid enough job, made it competitive, but one does have to think that this will be a different game if Destiny Lockett is able to play, and it is looking like she will be able to play. And so let's talk about those key players, starting with Thomas. We're already talking about Destiny Lockett on the regular season. At least these are the stats I was able to get from their website. 2,059 passing yards, 30 touchdowns to 12 picks, ran for another 436 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns. Defensively, though, 84 flagpoles, 6 picks, and 14 pass breakups. She is a heck of a flag football athlete here. If there was a draft for a pro flag league here consisting of college players, she would probably be a top prospect, a top 5 round 1 prospect. But there's not one yet. And so for her to come back for Thomas here, she does give them the edge. If Thomas was able to push life to double overtime without her, one could imagine what they could do with her, but she needs to continually, she just needs to play clean football from the quarterback position. We know she's a great athlete. She's a smart, just football player, right? But you can't be forcing stuff. You need to control the pace and be comfortable at the pace that you set. Now, another player to look out for is Ariana Christian here, who did get some snaps at quarterback every now and then, but is more so known as a receiver. The freshman has 642 receiving yards and 12 receiving touchdowns. She also adds some flexibility to the offense here because she can throw, right? So you could get real creative with what you want to do, but she's shifty. She's tough to take down in space. That is definitely somebody who has kind of emerged as a top receiving option for them on offense. Now, let's go ahead and talk about some players who are more so veterans who have been around maybe a little bit longer, starting with Diva Jones, who is actually Thomas's lead receiver, I believe, in receiving yards, and is currently second in interceptions. Diva Jones, we knew that she was going to be a veteran this year, and she has done exactly that. Lead by example and be a leader that this team needs just sorely, right? She's been so reliable this year, and she's definitely somebody that you could expect to step up for Thomas. In addition, on defense mostly, you have Ulysses Hodgson and Amiri Logan. They're the leaders in flagpoles and interceptions. They need to capitalize on plays for this defense. Those two players have had a pretty good season so far. They have fitted in pretty well for Thomas and the culture that they have over there, that Coach Seals has continued over there. And I would still probably say the strength of this team is the defense. The identity still feels like it's the defense. They take a lot of pride in that, in being chaotic, disrupting plays, and doing their thing and playing with high energy. And then offensively, they kind of feed off of that still. And that's not a bad thing at all. That is a culture that has been built and has continued to been built upon by this new coach here and Coach Seals. And so I'm interested to see how this team can do. But I'm just going to say right now, I do like their matchup versus Life just right off the bat because Destiny Lockett is available and it looks like everyone is mostly healthy. Now, it's not going to be an easy matchup because these are the players that got to play on Life. Cheyenne Brooks, their quarterback, 3,410 passing yards, 43 touchdowns, 16 interceptions on the year, but another 169 rushing yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. She has taken another step forward in her productivity in her game against Thomas the first time. It felt like there were some serious flashes where she was on fire, and then she got sloppy. I think she threw 3 touchdowns to 3 picks in that game. You cannot get away with throwing multiple turnovers against Thomas and expecting to win. And so for her, she needs to take care of the football while still doing the good things and, being productive, right? But you can't get as sloppy as you did in that regular season game. Now, her lead receiver, Altiera Gooch, 741 receiving yards, 17 touchdowns, has emerged as their top target against a defense like Thomas. She needs to make big plays for them to have a chance to beat him, right? I'm talking about big gains, contested catches, coming down with 50-50 balls. This Thomas defense isn't going to give you a lot, and so you got to take what's left. So there you go. And then defensively, I'm looking at Kira Zachary, who's their leader in sacks with 16 here. And I'm just looking at the triple threat abilities of running, throwing, catching of both Christian and Lockett on defense. She needs to be dialed in. Last time she had 3 sacks against them, but granted, Cam King was one of the quarterbacks who was not as mobile as a Lockett here. But if she did that again in this game, that would absolutely be legendary. But the name of the game against Thomas, you got to limit the damage they do on the ground, and that starts with Zachary. And then last but not least, Promise Cooper for them, leads the team with 8 interceptions, will continue to need her to play good defense. And then one last name I want to put out there is the Shea Branham here. If she could be the X factor for life and make some big plays outside of an Alteria Gooch, as in scoring plays or forced turnovers, that could be big. They've moved her around quite a bit here, so we'll see what happens. But if she can figure it out, then that could be a game changer. Now, whoever wins this has to go on and play Kaiser, and both of these teams lost to Kaiser pretty much around the same amount. Life lost 13-46, Thomas lost 41-6. We'll talk about Kaiser later, though. Now, the other quarterfinal was number 3 St. Thomas versus number 6 Weber here. They just last played in the last week of the regular season a couple weeks ago, which I watched, and I saw Weber win in double overtime 13-7. Now, let's go ahead and talk about their key players, starting with their quarterback, Luzariana Herrera, the freshman. She's had some ups and downs and has taken the majority of the snaps at quarterback, so I don't think there's any reason to think she won't at least start this game here. And like I said, ups and downs. If you just look at the numbers alone, she's had a solid year. But there are definitely some games where she will ball out, play at an extremely high level, and then some games where she's just sloppy with the football. And so for her, she cannot allow teams to win the turnover battle against her, right? She cannot turn over the ball. She has to take care of it. Give your playmakers a chance to make something happen because she has plenty of them, but she needs to play at a steady level here, and it's going to be hard because she's a freshman. It is very tough to play in a Sun Conference tournament here, postseason tournament at that, and so she's going to get a taste of what playoff football is like for the first time, but most importantly, she needs to know that she's got to ground herself at some point for them to have a chance to win, and I think she can. Now, it's going to be easy to ground yourself when you have as great of a player as Riley Bolser, who in my opinion has emerged as a dark horse MVP candidate and legit one of the best players in the entire country. Talked about, top 5 picks, first round potential picks in an all college flag football draft here with Destiny Lockett. Riley Bolser would also be somebody that would be in that conversation, in my opinion. She will set the tone for the postseason for Weber. She's going to make big plays on offense. She's going to pull a bunch of flags on defense. Let her cook, give her opportunities. Then you also have Caitlin Sigmundy, the veteran for this team here, who has helped set the standards on both sides of the football. You love to see her get a chance to make a play with the game on the line. That's what they did in overtime, and she made sure that it paid off there. And then this is just a whole bunch of other players that you got to look out for. Kalia Gator, Shannon Duran, Gianna Edwards, Savannah Cox, Emma Blanco. Look, the defense has shown the ability to rattle opposing offenses, whoever, for the most part. Now, in this game against St. Thomas, have to be opportunistic, have to be aggressive. There is going to be a chance, I think, to potentially score off of a turnover here, and they do such a good job lateraling over there at Weber. And so you just got to be ready. I think defensively, they played really well against them. Offensively, they did not have as good a game in that first game. And so I still think St. Thomas is a good enough team where it could go either way. But if you are Weber, you're trying to punch your ticket to the NAIA Invitational, you at least need to get a win here. And that actually goes for all the teams in these quarterfinals. Live, Thomas, St. Thomas, Weber. I think you all at least have to win a game to further secure your spot in the Invitational. So there is that. Now, let's go ahead and talk about St. Thomas here. Let's look at Sharice Newton and Leah Cruz. These are the two quarterbacks they've been rotating through this season, and they've both found success, but they've also both found struggles. When one is not playing quarterback, the other definitely serves as a decent receiving option, though. They cannot afford to turn over the ball and take bad sacks in this tournament. I believe the success of St. Thomas is largely on their shoulders, right? They got to deliver good quarterback play. That's how you win in this league. That's how you win in this conference. And so we'll see if it's passable, but they definitely have some great players around them to help them out, starting with Jasmine Henry Flash. I mean, she will need to make plays on both sides of the ball. She is one of the many great skill players they have, and in my opinion, I think her speed could definitely tip the scales. I know a couple weeks ago she had a game where she had a 4-sack game. Then another couple weeks ago, she led the team in receiving yards. She is somebody that, you want to get her involved on offense early on and really make teams honest. Or defensively, you want to give her opportunities to go create chaos. And so those are definitely opportunities that you hope to make for Jasmine Henry and allow her speed to tip the scales. And then last but not least, you have Nyla Geiger and Alex Harris here. Harris is a junior, Geiger is a freshman. Both of these skill players have had nice little breakout seasons, I feel for St. Thomas, as they have contributed on both sides of the ball. This postseason will test their mental, though, and give them an opportunity to step up in big moments. Like I said, they've contributed all season, but the postseason is a little bit different. I look forward to seeing what they do here because I have been impressed with the production they've been able to put up so far this year. Now, whoever wins this matchup between Weber and St. Thomas will have to play Warner, and once again, they've both lost to Warner by a similar amount. Weber 6-46, St. Thomas 7-47. Let's go ahead and talk about those teams that they might meet in the semis here, that all these teams might meet in the semis. Warner and Kaiser. In my opinion, both of these teams probably have a NAIA invitational spot locked down, no matter what happens this postseason, but we're still going to talk about him. Let's go ahead and talk about Kaiser first here. They will play the winner of St. Thomas Weber. Key players, let's start with the quarterback, Ava Wallace, another great quarterback in a long line of quarterbacks who went from Roden to Young to Wallace, and it has been phenomenal. She has been phenomenal. The freshman from Texas has 3,616 passing yards, 62 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. She has the ability to lead this team downfield and win tough games, but as shown in the Warner game, those margins become slimmer the deeper you go in the playoffs. The margin for error, you may lose the ball at 6 minutes and maybe not get it back, or by the time you get it back, it's too late, right? That's how these things go. And so for Ava Wallace, those are things that she's going to continue to learn as a young quarterback, and unfortunately against Warner, it showed, right? But I think that she is more than capable of beating a team like Warner. She has the weapons. She herself is extremely talented, very intelligent over there. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how she responds moving forward. First, beating a team in the semis, whether it's St. Thomas or Weber, and then moving on and potentially playing for that conference title, her first conference title at that. Now, other players to look at for Kaiser, you have Ashley Clam. She has been one of the best players in the country. She will have to make some plays to will this Kaiser team past some tough situations that they may face versus quality opponents, which is inevitable. This Kaiser team will respond to that energy. So there you go. And then there's Dakota Moberg. She is having an excellent breakout season as both a receiver and defender. She may not have the star power yet of a Clam or Wallace, but she is somebody who's absolutely vital to this team's success. If she can hold it down like she has been on both sides of the football, this Kaiser team will be just fine. And then last but not least, Tramisha Harris is another player I want to talk about. She was heating up in the second half of the season offensively while doing well enough defensively. If she can stay healthy consistently and play at a high level, she can be the game changer, the X factor that puts Kaiser over the top. But, it depends how healthy she could be and, if she can maintain that play on both sides of the ball as we enter the postseason where, you won't have a week to rest. You may have a couple hours. And so we'll see how all that turns out for Kaiser as they look to contend for yet another Sun Conference title. Now, looking at Warner, they have been unstoppable. They're the number one team in the country for a reason. Let's go ahead and start with the queen of the Royals, Katherine Hutchinson, their quarterback, the front runner for MVP, in my opinion, has had an excellent season that is in large part to her success at quarterback. She's taken her game to a whole nother level. With an arsenal at her disposal, it's up to her to continue to use it all the way to a Sun Conference title. She's been lights out. There's no reason not to expect that moving forward. Now, let's talk about the arsenal at hand here. The Royal squad that is, this Royals receivers core is maybe the greatest women's college flag football receiving core of all time. They've definitely put up great numbers. Ada Vincenzini, Jessica Finley, Avalon Lux-Offerman, Maggie Lauber, or Mariah Gordon, right? Just to name a few there. They have put up incredible numbers for receivers with over 20-plus touchdowns on the year. And this group, and this is a group, in my opinion, that has a lot of players who would be number one receivers on the majority of teams around the country. You pick your poison. Right, you pick your poison. I think Mims does a good job over there scheming it up for players and just exposing weaknesses on opposing offenses. And he has a number of players to pick from to do that with. And, that's something that not many coaches could say. And so this offense truly can score at will and in a variety of different ways because of the so many talented receivers they have and a capable quarterback who has been extremely decisive and great this year. And then last but not least, I want to talk about Lauren Clark on this defense here. Look, Lauren Clark has done it all, leading an excellent Warner defense that, in my opinion, has been a little overshadowed by the greatness of the offense. But this season has legitimately been the best defense in the country. They got challenged by Kaiser, and in my opinion, they responded spectacularly in the second half. That is all we are looking for again going into the Sun Conference tournament here. It's not just Lauren Clark, it's Vincenzini, it's all the other rushers. I think their rushers combined for like 40 sacks or something crazy like that. Mariah Gordon holding it down on the back end. They just have so much talent on the defensive side of the ball, and they can adjust to you so well. They are as dangerous as your offense. Even if you figure out how to slow down their offense, defensively, this defense could still force a turnover against you. And that's how good they are. And so, really, the name of the game for Warner is to continue what you've been doing, right? I think the expectations at this point are expectations that you've built off an undefeated season. And so, right now, there's only one expectation, and that's winning it all. This championship, the national championship. That is the main expectation for Warner. And like I said, you don't go undefeated and not expect that to be the expectation, right? That is something that they've put down themselves and they've worked hard at. And so we'll see if they could do it. Now you got some tough teams. Kaiser's going to come back swinging. Guarantee that for sure here. Then, of course, there's always the possibility that somebody gets upset. And if any of these teams get upset, the team that gets by them deserves to be there in the championship with you. And that's definitely something you cannot overlook. So there you go. The championship will be played on April 25th, Saturday at Warner. Go ahead and check it out. If you're there live, it should be some really good football. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about the KCAC tournament here, hosted by Ottawa. Let's hop right into the quarterfinals, starting with the 1 seed Ottawa playing Heston. In the regular season, Ottawa did beat them 27-7 here, but I do think it could have potentially been worse. Looking at key players for Ottawa, Anna Anderson, their freshman quarterback, has had a great season, passing for 3,278 yards, 46 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions, while rushing for another 425 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns. In my opinion, they should get by Heston, but in general, Anderson has shown the ability to win and be counted on in tough situations. It'll be interesting to see how she carves out her own legacy this year. Now, speaking of legacy, let's talk about the offensive veterans for Ottawa. Marley Spielberg, Alyssa Linkus, Tatiana Dos Santos. There are other veterans on the offensive side, as well as rising stars like Olga Sotillo, but the standard does not change for Ottawa. They will be called on to play the role, and that is to be expected out of them. They will play it at a very high level. Now let's talk about the defensive veterans. Jukani Washington, DJ Paris, Sue Kaufman. They got to continue to bring the energy and keep this team on track here. I think as they play tougher opponents with more explosive offenses, these players are going to bring the energy, they're going to set the tone early on, and they're going to slow things down and give your offense an opportunity to potentially win some games here. But I think it really starts with the defense, especially the veterans of this Ottawa team, to just slow everything down, keep the young players in check, help them along here, and help them win these tough games because they have already played in a lot of close games this season, and that's not going to go away once the postseason starts. Now, let's look at Heston real quick here. Alexis Pabon, their quarterback, she needs to play patiently at quarterback and continue to deliver the ball decisively and accurately. And then Akiva Brown, she's probably their top skill player for Heston, needs to come out and take charge as the playmaker. She leads the team as a receiver and defensively has a good number of pulls as well. But you can't win tough games without stepping up to a challenge. This Ottawa team is a tough team. You can't go in thinking you already lost, right? You got to go ahead and step up to the challenge and see what happens. But I just will say I probably have Ottawa winning and moving on to the semis, where I believe they would go ahead and play the winner of Midland-Graceland. So let's talk about that quarterfinal. Midland-Graceland, in the regular season, Midland actually shut out Graceland 26-0 earlier on in the season. Let's talk about the key players for Midland, because they have a very interesting mix here, starting with their quarterback, Lotta Wolf. The Finnish quarterback has had some ups and downs this season, but entering this tournament, her squad is on a 5-game win streak. She has shown the ability to light up the scoreboard, but there have also been some struggles along the way. It is worth noting that while they beat Graceland 26-0, she did throw as many interceptions as touchdowns, which was 3. But then the next game, that would be corrected, as she outplayed Tara Lorente of Baker on their way to a big upset win. This experience is incredibly valuable for the young quarterback, and I'm really excited to see how she does in more high-pressure situations, playing a team like Graceland again, who I don't think it's going to be as big of a win for Midland. I think this will be a much closer game for all teams here. Now let's talk about a couple other fellow freshmen with Lotta Wolf here, starting with Holiness Hodges. I believe she goes by Mara here, but she has had an excellent freshman year, racking up 15 touchdowns as their utility player, and then on defense has contributed well too. If they are to win, she needs to step up to the plate and follow the lead of her veterans. On top of that, we have another freshman as well that I want to talk about, Melanie Archuleta, aka Ducky. Ducky has had a great season both at linebacker and center for the freshman player. Like her fellow freshmen in Wolf and Hodges, she will be getting the first taste of postseason play here soon, and it is a little bit different. She's contributed well as a linebacker, pulling a lot of flags, and then as one of their check down options as well. But really, when I look at this Midland team, and I said it in their season preview, I want to say, but I look at this Midland team and I see a lot of veterans here. Olivia Dominguez-Millsap, Alyssa Butler, Laya Livingston, Emily Farron, just to name a few. These players, I think Jocelyn Lopez as well. Look, these players have been through the ups and downs of this Midland program, but ever since they started as freshmen, they have brought a level of stability to this program that, honestly, has been really hard for a lot of other first-year programs around the country to find. You look at the NAIA level, the JUCO level, the D2, D3, D1 level. There are teams that struggle to find a core this consistent as this group. And so, there's no reason to doubt this exceptional core to once again, for the last time I believe, take the field in those Midland colors and find a way to get it done. Next to Ottawa, there's not a team with more experience in this conference, in my opinion. This group of veterans knows what it takes to get it done, and you can count on them to lead. That is why they're your lead receivers. That is why they're your leaders on defense in the secondary. That is why this Midland team has been more successful than other teams that have been around. Sometimes even, I don't think there have been any teams longer than them, but some teams, almost as long as them. And it's been because of this core. And so I think you trust this core as well as those freshmen I just shouted out and the other great players they have over there. I think it's a great combination here. You trust this core group of veterans to lead the team and help them to a postseason win, which against a team like Graceland, who does not have as much experience, that is definitely something that will benefit them here, I believe. Now, let's look at Graceland, because they're not a bad team either going into year 2, but things are a little interesting here. I know their coach will be leaving after this season, as well as I assume a number of other players. So I do kind of wonder what the vibes are over there, but I'm sure they're going to give it a good last run before things change. Let's talk about their quarterback, the freshman, Sierra Flores. 45 passing touchdowns, 21 interceptions on the year as a freshman. Has had ups and downs as freshman seasons go, showing a lot of productivity at times, but turnovers have been an issue in closer games. In the Reinhardt game, which was a 6-point game, she had 2 interceptions. In a 3-point loss versus Campbellsville, she had 3 interceptions. If she is dialed in, then things can get interesting, but we will see. You can't win close games with turnovers. So there you go. You have Delaney Mondino, who's been so reliable. She has built upon a great freshman year and is yet another big-time producer on both sides of the ball. I view her as their prime playmaker, and they will follow whatever energy she puts out. And so I'm excited to see what that looks like and some of the plays she can make. And then last but not least, got to shout out Sadie Lee. I believe she leads the team in flagpoles as a freshman with 110. Also has a sack and 3 interceptions on the year. The defense has seen some struggles all year, and it will be up to players like her and Mondino to help them figure it out. You cannot have defensive miscommunications or struggles this late in the year. And so we'll see what happens, but against a team like Midland, who has a lot of experience here, I'd probably give the edge to Midland for now to go ahead and head to the next round, and I believe they would face off with probably Ottawa. So there you go. Now, looking at the other quarterfinal here, Kansas Wesleyan versus Southwestern. Kansas Wesleyan beat them 39-0 last time, so obviously I'm going to favor them in this one. Key players, obviously their quarterback, Shahiro Owada, in what will be the final year for the legend. She has put up elite efficiency, throwing for 45 touchdowns, 2,009 yards, so only 5 interceptions. This will be one of her last pushes at an MVP, not that it matters to her, which, in my opinion, she may only be able to win with the KCAC title, and with a quarterback like that, I think Kansas Wesleyan has as good a chance as anybody at this conference title. Now, another veteran to talk about here, Aaliyah Wood. I believe this will also be her final year as she looks to cap off an electric collegiate career here, on the season so far, 955 receiving yards, 17 touchdowns, as she has emerged as the clear wideout 1 for Kansas Wesleyan. And then as a DB, she'll continue to lead the defense and line up with the best here. You could rely on Owada to Wood being your go-to when you need them the most if you're Kansas Wesleyan. That is where it's going to start, in my opinion, for this K-Dub team to find success in the postseason. But last but not least, you have Ava Durr. She has stepped up as their top flag puller this season and will help lead a defense that has been decent. Defensively, they will need to play disciplined enough, though, to take down in Ottawa. Like I said, they've been decent. They definitely could be better, and I think that only comes with experience. So we'll see how that goes for them. Key players for Southwestern here. Kennedy Hayes, their quarterback, dual threat, 1,838 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, 18 picks. You have Viviana Solis, 578 yards, 5 touchdowns. Mary Jones, 625 yards, 9 touchdowns. And Andrea Moon, who has 15 sacks on the year. Not bad stats at all here, but I just think Kansas Wesleyan has so much more depth than Southwestern right now, and that does matter. And so I do have Kansas Wesleyan pretty much moving on. I'd be really surprised if they did not move on from this one here, despite, the great effort that Southwestern has been playing with what they have, honestly. And then last but not least, the last quarterfinal I want to talk about, Baker versus William Woods here. Baker last beat them 42-0. Key players for Baker, Terry Lorente, one of the top dual threat quarterbacks in the country, passed for 1,700 yards, 28 passing touchdowns and 19 picks, but also had 16 rushing touchdowns. The only 2 losses that Baker had on the year, she just had very inefficient games as a passer and had a turnover at least. If she can play clean football, Baker's as dangerous as anybody in the country. And she's that dynamic, but I do think there are times where it just gets away from her. So we'll see. Another player to look out for, obviously, is NAIA Waller, the ultimate utility player. She can play all over, receiver, running back, quarterback, and just be an offensive weapon that can expose a weak spot of a defense over and over again. Her Lorente really gives this team a lot of offensive flexibility to attack teams in ways that they have not been attacked, at least commonly, all season. And then defensively, I want to talk about Baker a little bit by talking about Daniela Canals here. If I look correctly, it looks like she is their lead puller in flags with over 70. This Baker team has a good secondary with athletes who match up well with other teams, despite, in my opinion, the identity of this offense maybe being, the identity of this team maybe being more offensive-centric. Defensively, they've had some good showouts, though, and you can't sleep on them at all. Now, for William Woods, let's talk about it. At quarterback, Shemaiah Williams, 1,639 yards, 14 touchdowns, 15 picks, only 71 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. She absolutely needs to play better than that to beat a team like Baker. Can't have more turnovers than touchdowns, that whole thing. And you can't leave opportunities on the field either. Then you have Addie Schillick here, leads the team with 453 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, and then defensively, 64 flag pulls and 4 interceptions. She will need to do a lot as their primary playmaker. I think one of the bigger questions I had going into the season was seeing who could step up next to a Schillick on offense here. And, you've had some players have their shine every now and then, but I don't think there was ever like a significant point where somebody really took advantage of a situation over a course of a couple games here. And so, Schillick's going to do her thing, but most teams know that they're going to go to her. And then last but not least, rushers Aja Smith and Sam Menard here. They have 8 and 12 sacks, respectively, which is pretty good. And I think if they could turn it up against opposing offenses, they'll be just fine, and that'll change the dynamic of a lot of games here. But against a team like Baker, you also need to be able to score, and that is, I'm a little concerned about that. I don't know if the offense could keep up with a team like Baker, even if it's a Baker team that is getting challenged defensively, which they've shown they could be in the past. And so I'm probably going to go ahead and lean Baker, but we'll see what happens. And so basically what this comes out to, at least predictions-wise, I have Ottawa playing the winner of Midland versus Graceland, and then Kansas Wesleyan will go ahead and most likely play Baker, I would say. So really, it would be Ottawa. What I'm predicting is Ottawa versus Midland, and then Kansas Wesleyan versus Baker. That's where things get interesting. I don't know if a Midland could beat an Ottawa team, but if they do, things get interesting because I really don't feel like Ottawa is out of the Invitational, even if they lose this early. And so, out of the NAIA Invitational, not the conference tournament, right? If they lose in the conference tournament, it's over. But if they lose the conference tournament, I still think they'll get invited. Midland will go ahead and put themselves in a very interesting spot if they do beat them. So that's where things get interesting. Then you have Kansas Wesleyan and Baker. Both teams desperately need to beat the other right here to make the Invitational. At the time I'm recording this, the updated rankings haven't come out yet, but I would imagine that it would be really hard to pull 3 teams from a conference and justify them making the Invitational. Not impossible, but it will be hard. And so you need to have as good a resume as possible. That means having another win over the other. That definitely matters there. So we will see what happens in the KCAC, but it's going to heat up and it's going to be some great football this weekend, hosted by Ottawa. All right, now let's go ahead and preview what is now going to be called the NAIA East Independent Championships here. Here's how it's going to go down. Campbellsville, Cumberland, Lindsey Wilson, Milligan, Siena Heights, and St. Francis will be separated to two different pool plays here, and we'll play a round-robin schedule, which will then help rank the teams for an elimination bracket, and that'll all take place literally this weekend here. So I know tomorrow, the 22nd, is when they're supposed to announce the official pools and whatnot, but I'm just going to preview all of these teams right here. Now, what's on the line is that the winner of this tournament gets an automatic bid to the NAIA Invitational. Right now, as it stands, Hope is the only one who has secured an official bid so far here. And then obviously with the Sun Conference and KCAC going on, the winners of those championships will go ahead and secure an official bid as well. Now, this is where things get really interesting because I do think it can get really close between these teams here because they are all going to play each other, I believe, at least one time before it gets into elimination. And so let's just start talking about them here and the key players for each team. Starting with Milligan, who is probably the favorite to make it out of this group here. You have a quarterback in Richard Kaiser who has been putting up numbers up with the best of them, MVP type of numbers, if I do say so myself here, and has taken yet another step forward and has just played really good football. Watching a couple of her games here, at least recently, she's been so on the money. One of the games I watched was Huntington, and that game against a talented group over there, and she was throwing absolute dimes over there, even though, there's some struggles from the receivers, right? But she was playing at a high level. You can expect her to definitely be a threat in this tournament as the most experienced quarterback, because I think everybody else I think everyone else in this tournament, they're starting freshman QBs. And so that is a significant advantage she has over everyone. Plus it's Milligan, so they're just good like that as well. It also helps that she has some great receivers. Krista Quinn taking another step forward, 1,106 receiving yards and 23 touchdowns. Lily Rumrow, a freshman phenom for them, 969 receiving yards, 17 touchdowns. Ashton Weirley, 934 receiving yards, 20 receiving touchdowns. And that's not even including the likes of Caitlin Quinn, who's also doing her thing as well. And Sam Urso, their check down option for them. This Milligan offense could score, and they have experience doing it against some top teams in the country, which, when they're playing in a tournament like this with so many new programs, they just have a natural advantage. So there you go. Now, one player to look out for defensively. I mean, they have a lot of great defensive players, but you got to look out for the freshman standout, Parker Bridges here. They really had such a good freshman class this last year here, but on the season, 109 flagpoles, 5 sacks, 8 interceptions, and has been an absolute monster, a game changer for them. She is going to be a nightmare for a lot of first-year quarterbacks in this tournament. Now, moving on here, let's talk about the next most experienced group, and it's Campbellsville, who's been around for a little bit. Does have a first-year head coach, but he has been their OC. Coach Mack has been their OC for a minute here, so still a lot of experience. Let's talk about the quarterback, Corinne Talkington. While she has had a better sophomore year, it is to be seen whether she can consistently win big games. She's still better than last year for sure, so the floor is definitely a little bit higher here. But I know when she has her target, Alex Odom, out there, she can line it up with the best of them. Let's talk about Alex Odom too. Prime playmaker on both sides of the ball here. When she's healthy, there's a good chance that they can make the game competitive with almost anybody in the country, and I mean that. Whenever she plays, she is consistently getting a touchdown and an interception. Those are big swings in the game. Scoring and forcing a turnover are massive swings here. And then Talkington just has such a great connection with Odom. There are times where, it's well covered, it looks good, but it's just a better play by both of them. And both of them having more experience than some of these other players, will go a long way as well for Campbellsville, who is finally looking a little healthy here as well. A little bit more healthy than the beginning of the season for sure. And trust me, it's not just about Alex Odom. They have some other great receivers there as well. But when you have a player like her that is just taking a lot of that attention, that allows a lot of other players to thrive. So there you go. Now, defensively, let's talk about Tamaya Woody here. She's led this defense from the linebacker spot, who has seen a lot of ups and downs. They've struggled against some good offenses this season. Now, she's been pretty productive and whatnot, but this is definitely a defense that, struggled against some more dynamic quarterbacks here. They've played Lindsey Wilson, St. Francis, all of them, right? And so you hope to have a little bit more from your defense going into this tournament here. I think having a player like Alex Odom would go a long way, like I've been saying. Now let's go ahead and talk about Lindsey Wilson, a first-year program with a first-year coach. All mostly freshmen on this team as well. I mean, you have Cadence Warbers, Jade Mazziato, who played for Warner, so they do bring a little bit more experience, and that'll help this team, but still a lot of inexperience here. But talented inexperience at that, starting with their quarterback, Amaya Pablo. She's had an excellent season, both through the air and the ground. When she's hot, she might be the most unstoppable quarterback in the country. But we will see how far this young quarterback can lead this team here. I will say this, when they have played teams that are a little bit more talented defensively, they've struggled a little bit more here. And so, she kind of switches her game from, being a bit more of a gunslinger, taking more chances, to having to manage the game a little bit more and not giving the opposing offenses as many chances by turning over the ball. And so definitely some learning to do still as a young quarterback on the college level, but just as dynamic a player as you could hope for. Now, on the other side of the ball is her old high school teammate, still teammate right now, Emily Good. At linebacker, she has been extremely productive, but just leads an inexperienced crew over there. This will be a decent experience for a young defensive group who, honestly, they just need to be exposed to how tough it could be. Now, they played, I think, all these teams at least once, so that will go in their favor. This is definitely a team that could make a little bit of a run. Can I see them beating a Milligan? I don't know. I think the only way they can is if they played just arguably the best game of their lives, which I don't think is out of question, right? They could definitely peak right now, but we'll see. We'll see if they have the numbers and the talent to go head-to-head with them in this tournament. Now, another team who's a young team is Cumberland. First-year program, Madison Woodard, though, has led this team. She is a strong-arm quarterback who's not afraid to let it fly this season. I believe she had 50 touchdowns, but she also had, I think, over 20 interceptions as well, and struggled with some turnovers. I think if she could play mistake-free on this level, they could go decently far. Now, other players to look out for Cumberland, Marley Hyde. She has emerged as their lead receiver with 1,550 yards and 23 receiving touchdowns. If you need somebody to score, they're going to probably look her way, I would imagine, or scheme something up for Marley Hyde. And then last but not least, you got to look at this young defense led by Jada Starnes and Dynasty Davis. They have a young defense who has shown flashes of challenging really good teams, but for the most part has struggled finding consistency. So that's really the name of the game for Cumberland, consistency. If they could find it in this tournament against this many good teams, they could potentially make a run. They have the talent to do so, but they are still a young team. There's still some learning to do. We'll see how much more learning is required before they can hit that level of consistency that I'm sure they are striving for. Now, moving on, we have St. Francis here. Let's start with their freshmen, because I don't think they have any. I don't think they have any transfers. This should be a mostly freshman group here. But let's start with their quarterback, Gianna Reyes. The dude that quarterback has led a team that has shocked some programs, albeit being a young program themselves. She has shown to be very productive with the ability to be a spark plug for them, whether it's on the ground, running the ball, or extending a play, or throwing the ball, where she has thrown with some really good touch and has been dynamic here. And like I said, they've gotten some big wins too. That Weber game was a big win for them down in Florida too, which looks really good on their resume. They've beat a lot of these other teams here as well, so they are pretty hot. Now, it's not just her. She has some great skill players in Haley Witherspoon and Harmony Walker, who play both ways, I believe, and I think these two skill players have been electric on both sides of the football and has really challenged the skill groups of opposing teams. Like, I look at these two skill players, really this big three of Reyes, Witherspoon, Walker, and I'm like, this trio could outplay a lot of other squads, even if they have a little bit of experience. I think as of right now, I could see St. Francis playing Milligan in this tournament championship, and then that could be a really good game. But I don't know if that's necessarily a win for them. They would have to play at a very high level and stay sharp, especially near the end of the tournament in this one. So we'll see what happens, but St. Francis is a very interesting team. They got a lot of firepower over there, and a quarterback who knows how to use it, which is the bigger problem. Now, last but not least, we have Siena Heights here. Let's start with the quarterback. Brianna Saunders here, the young quarterback, will need to play at a consistent level against teams to compete. She's had some decent games where she can light it up, but against quality opponents, there just really haven't been a whole lot going on there. And I think that's the biggest concern for me. But she will have some skill players like Akiyamura Dunn, one of the veterans of this group, who's just so dynamic, somebody who will make things happen on both sides of the ball. Offensively, if you're Siena Heights, you probably want to get her involved early on here. You could never go wrong with getting your star more involved here, and then that'll open up the things for everyone else. People like Mackenzie Pope, a freshman who's had some decent games as the top receiving option for them, but for Siena Heights to move on in this tournament, absolutely need to produce. Anything less than that will not be good for Siena Heights. So we'll see what happens here. I think it will definitely be interesting to see how pool play goes down and see, who gets matched up with who. But at the end of the day, I do think Milligan is probably the team to beat for this automatic bid. But we'll see. You have a lot of young teams, young players, young coaches. You got some ambition going on around here as well. You never know when somebody gets upset and falls. And if Milligan does get their first loss in this tournament, that makes things really interesting, because I don't know if you could just leave them completely out. But scenarios, let's see what happens this week. All right, now on the D3 level, we actually have 3 championships going on here, I believe. You have the United East, you have the Atlantic East, and then you have the Empire 8. Now, at the time I am recording this, the Empire 8, as well as, I believe, the Atlantic East, all have quarterfinal games that are happening today. So, for tomorrow's episode, I just didn't think that there would be a point to previewing these teams. Make sure you check out the recap episode where we will talk about what happened. I will talk about what happened in those playoff games. But we do have 2 D3s, because the Northern Athletic College Conference will also be doing theirs on Saturday, but we'll talk about that on the segment after this one. We are actually going to talk quickly about the United East here, because they will be playing all their games on Saturday for their conference tournament. In this tournament will be Gallaudet versus Cedar Crest, and then Penn State Harrisburg versus Cairns, so only 2 rounds pretty much here. Let's go ahead and preview that Gallaudet side of the bracket. As most of you know, they are the United East Conference champions of last year. This year, they claimed the regular season title pretty easily, and have played at a high level. In the regular season, Gallaudet beat Cedar Crest 34-6, and then more recently 15-0. But that was a pretty sloppy game by Gallaudet in general. We'll see if that has any implications on this matchup, though. But these are the 3 players that you got to look at for Gallaudet if you happen to be around and get to watch that game. But Gianna Visco, their quarterback, 2,396 passing yards, 40 touchdowns, 18 interceptions. She has been on fire for them all season. It is worth noting, in that Cedar Crest game, she did throw 3 interceptions, even though they still won by 15, right? But we'll see if that's something that, maybe Cedar Crest was able to find out against her and maybe exploit against her one more time. But I think you could probably rely on Gianna Visco to be reliant and be the quarterback that commands that offense over there. An offense that has a lot of weapons, starting with Lumer Citrine here, who had 1,157 receiving yards and 15 touchdowns on the year. Also on defense, their leader in interceptions with 9. She is an absolutely great athlete for them, a game changer who is tough to guard on both sides of the football. If they are going to score, they're going to start by getting either her or this other player involved. And this other player is their center, Jada Zaremka. I think she's standing at 6 foot, so a very tall center. But 597 receiving yards and 16 touchdowns on the year. That trio of Visco, Citrine, Zaremka has been electric all season. And really, with the exception of Cedar Crest, kind of slowing them down a little bit in their last game, 15-0, they haven't found much opposition, and so that really makes this semifinal very interesting here. In the last regular season game they played, Zaremka only had 1 reception, so if they could limit Citrine or Zaremka to 1 reception again, they could be in business. Now let's talk about Cedar Crest here. I'm looking at one player in particular, Ginger Kurdock, who's their top receiver in DB, just their top athlete on both sides of the ball. She needs to produce at an incredible level for them to win. This Cedar Crest team, they've had some instability at quarterback, other offensive options. And so Ginger Kurdock, she cannot afford to have a bad game here. She needs to step it up and play at a high level and then hopefully attract enough attention where everyone else could succeed. But if I had to choose, I'd probably still have Gallaudet going to the United East Conference Championship, barring a big upset. Now, on the other side of the bracket, you have Penn State Harrisburg playing Cairn here. In the regular season, Cairn lost to them 12-0, and then more recently 41-0, which definitely makes things interesting. Let's talk about Cairn here. Starting with their quarterback, Desiree Bright, 1,586 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, 12 picks. She's had some ups and downs here against Penn State. She hasn't necessarily played well, so it's maybe not a great recipe, but it is the 3rd time they'll be playing, so maybe this will be her best game yet against them. You never know. Then defensively for Cairn, you have Julianne Condurso with 10 sacks and Abigail Strange with 7. If this defense could produce and slow down the Penn State offense here, which has a lot of weapons, then they will definitely be in a more winnable situation. Now, if they have to get into a shootout, that's a very tough situation for them, plain and simple. Now, let's look at Penn State Harrisburg, starting with their star player, in my opinion, or one of their stars, Nadia King. The quarterback has put up some amazing stat lines through the air and ground this season. I mean, this year alone, 45 total touchdowns, over 2,200 yards of offense. And then defensively has also been important, grabbing 7 interceptions. She will have to maintain this play for them to continuously find success in the postseason. I think if she plays at this level against Cairn, they win. And then against Gallaudet, she has to have the best game she's had in her career. And I think she is very capable of that, especially when you have other players like a Jordan Carpenter, one of her top receivers who had 391 yards and 6 touchdowns. But most importantly, contributed on defense where she had 9 interceptions. If Carpenter could get going, forcing some turnovers and getting the ball to their offense, the better off Penn State Harrisburg will be. Then last but not least, you have Mila Guest, who had 649 yards and 12 receiving touchdowns, really picking it up this last half of the season for Penn State Harrisburg. She is one of King's favorite targets here. If she could get going, then I really feel like this Penn State Harrisburg team could get going against anybody. So we will see. Right now, I think it's probably going to be Gallaudet and Penn State Harrisburg in the conference championship. I feel like it's kind of been leading up to this for a while now, even though they have played twice and Gallaudet has beat them twice here. You never know what happens in a conference championship, and so I'm very excited to see what goes down this Saturday. All right, now I can't find a bracket, but the Northern Athletics College Conference will have a conference tournament this year. And there's only going to be 4 teams participating here. Marion out of Wisconsin will be hosting, so there you go. And then you have Aurora from Illinois, Benedictine from Illinois, and Rockford from Illinois, who will all be competing. Like I said, right now I don't have the bracket, so I'm just going to go through and talk about each team here. Let's go ahead and start with the host of this bracket, or I guess really of this first ever tournament here in Marion. Let's look at the quarterback situation. Holly Goodwin has had a pretty good last couple weeks here. 24 touchdowns to 17 picks, but 1,545 passing yards there, as she has been their main passer. Also 400 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. Look to her. I mean, the offense always starts with the quarterback, but you got to look at her to make some big plays early on to go ahead and get this Marion team moving. Looking at the receiving core here, Kendall Graves is their lead receiver with 685 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns. You have Daniela Chaudemet, Reagan Montello, and Emily Easton, who are also doing their thing with multiple touchdowns each, but it does look like Graves will be the main target, at least on offense there. And then defensively, I really feel like their defense is played at a pretty decent level here. Let's just go ahead and look at who's leading in polls, which is Reagan Montello, who has 70 right now, and 6 of those are for a loss. The leader in sacks is a tie. Anna Riley and Yandang Awak each have 9 sacks. Then interception-wise, Daniela Chaudemet has 11 interceptions and 14 pass breakups. And Holly Goodwin adding on another 6 and 4 here. And then Kendall Graves 5 and 6, as a lot of these players can play both ways, which is not super surprising, but it should make for some good football. They have won a number of games in a row recently. I know they are 9-3, and so far, I think their last game they lost was against Aurora at the beginning of the month, where they lost 15-41. Other than that, Marion has been rolling. Speaking of Aurora here, let's go ahead and talk about them. They will be attending this one as well here. Ended the season with a good record, 12-2. A little bit of a mixed bag here in April. I mean, started out with, well, I don't know about a mixed bag. You definitely won more in April here, but started off with a 27-12 win over Brandon Stratton, 28-12 over Purdue Northwest, 41-15 over Marion, 52-6 over Benedictine, 52-13 over Illinois College, 38-12 over North Park, and then a loss to Siena Heights by 1, and a win against Wittenberg, 48-12, and then a loss to St. Francis by a score, 20-14. So a little up and down, right? But definitely a lot of good things going on. Let's go ahead and look at their quarterback situation here, which has been really efficient here. Kaylin Morgan, 1,942 yards, 32 touchdowns to only 3 picks, throwing at 68% here. You love to see that if you are Aurora here. Morgan also adds on another 312 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. And then Jade Morgan adds on another 91 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns as well. Receiving-wise, she does a good job spreading out the ball. But Claire Strong is her lead receiver with 443 yards and 10 touchdowns, followed by Jenna Grice with 314 and 16 touchdowns for this Aurora squad. And then defensively for them, let's go ahead and pull this up. Ellie Galberchek, 26 or 29 polls here. Rachel Wicke with 26. Claire Strong with 26. Sack-wise, you have Jemiah Anderson, who leads with 14 sacks, playing at a high level. Tiandra Henry not too far behind her, though, with 3 sacks as well. And then defensively, Emily Galberchek leads with 7 interceptions. And so this team is pretty well put together. I feel like they have a lot of balance all over. Like most D3s in Illinois, I do think they still run the ball kind of a lot. But other than that, this Aurora team definitely has some athletes. It'll be interesting to see how they are punished. Moving on here, we have Benedictine, not the one in Mesa, but the one in Illinois here. Their quarterback, Zella Zach, is their leading rusher with 457 yards and 5 touchdowns. Also, their leading passer with only 680 yards and 2 interceptions here, as they have struggled quite a bit on offense. Receiving-wise, Geez, I don't think there's anybody listed here with over 30 receiving yards through 7 games. So that's definitely tough there. And then defensively for Benedictine Mesa, Leilani Gahn has 51 flag pulls, 2 interceptions, 4 pass breakups. Super productive on that side of the football. But unfortunately, just not doing enough here, as it did not seem Benedictine won a lot. Yeah, they're 1-3 now that I'm looking at it right now. And so we'll see if they can upset somebody. But like I said, they're 1-3. Then last but not least, we have Rockford here going through some interesting things at quarterback. Quintasia Mills and Amari Camacho Anderson have kind of been splitting times here, but it feels like to me Camacho Anderson is injured, because when she is healthy, they get her out there, and Quintasia Mills goes ahead and moves somewhere else where she could get the ball a bit more here as a skill player. But I mean, you make do with what you have, and so we'll see who starts for them. It does matter, because Camacho Anderson is more of the pocket passer. Mills is definitely closer to a pure runner, so there is that. Receiving wise, Mercedes Morales was their lead receiver with only 199 and a touchdown on the season. Same with Gray, 155 and a touchdown on the season. Looking at them defensively, Gina Niels led with 41 flag pulls for them. Their sack leader was Kezia Jolakor with 6 sacks, and then their interception leader was a tie between Mercedes Morales and Emily Lynn. And they've been playing okay here. I mean, they're 3-8, right? So you got to keep that in mind. Interested in seeing Illinois Wesleyan not getting in this. Maybe they're not part of that conference per se, but we'll see what happens for them. If I had to pick 2 winners probably, or a matchup I'm looking at, it's probably going to be Marion and Aurora, and then that game could definitely get interesting. So we'll see what happens, but looking forward to what goes down this Saturday, April 25th. Alrighty, and that'll do it for this episode of the Playmakers Corner podcast. Make sure you tune in to episode 515 next week to hear all about the results of these great conference tournaments. It is championship weekend. We will be finding out who makes the NAIA Invitational and so much more past this weekend as well. And we're excited to cover it. But until next time, we'll catch you later.